So this is Bleeding Charismatically Lemon Tree. What are we at? 16 by 20, thick profile canvas. This is spray paint, just like the border. The background is oil paint, and then oil pastel on top of that. And then there's like the design sample as well, right there. And that is Lemon Tree. So, or I should say Bleeding Charismatically Lemon Tree. Another thing that I'll say before I get into the specifics of this piece is that the response to this piece has definitely had me questioning things more, again, which is a good thing to have in practice, just to do things more intentionally and purposely. Just had me thinking about visual art versus conceptual art and this body of work, and just the way that I work a lot of the time, and trying to be more conscious and aware of that before I go into it with visuals. And I've talked about this a little bit before with news paintings, and like especially that first one. How much of this do I still need to paint? People get the point. If they get the point, why do I need to go through the exercise of painting every little, part of this noose when I can just outline it and you get it? So the response to this, and I'm saying the response to it so far, is that it has been much more popular than some of the other work that I've done recently, despite the concepts to me being just as weighty and as heavy. But it's the visuals of this that have led to a more, just more response, period. And I like the visuals of this a lot. I think it is very aesthetically pleasing. I think it's got things going on that make it definitely easier to interpret, but also has extra flavor, is the way I'd put it. So it's interesting because as I'm getting a response to what I've been posting for this work, I'm getting more input of my own process and practice. Or just that I'm having, I don't know how to explain it. I am evaluating that response, I'm taking that response in and processing it and using that information and that data to look at my own process and practice so I can make better informed choices about that in the future. I'm going to explain this. Bleeding Charismatically, Lemon Trees, the self-portrait, like a true self-portrait where I'm depicting a reference of myself. Did not do any projection for this. This is freehand, which I guess I'll get to the technical stuff here as well. Well, they're going to go hand in hand pretty quick. But I'm going to start from the start. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go from the beginning. So the very beginning, Lemon Tree is reference to a Post Malone song. You should go listen to that song. In fact, if you have not heard that song, I would say go and listen to it right now before we continue having this conversation, or before you continue listening to me ramble on. It's a sad song, and there's definitely very specific parts about it, which I included in one of the reels of or not the reel, but like the photos of this piece, where he discusses, like some people have an apple tree, some people have, I don't remember all the different types of trees he says, basically saying like some people have tangerines, some people are like really happy with what they're given, and I'm SOL with this lemon tree. And so there's a lot going on there for me. Like, I think that I had written down Lemon Tree because I knew that I had wanted to title a work. I knew that I was feeling a lot of these things that he was expressing, and a lot of the sads about, just kind of that thing of like grass is greener somewhere else, like about, being grateful for what you have, trying to make do with what you have, seeing the positives of your situation and all that stuff, while still feeling like, no, the grass is greener somewhere else, like I wish I was in a different scenario, or that my context was different, that things would have worked out differently, whatever. Like, that's just a really real and human thing to experience and feel, and I was definitely feeling that as well. So Lemon Tree kind of came from that I wanted that like represented. I decided just to go with yellow and make it really bright, and have like this really nice, welcoming, bright feeling, but also then there's this chaos going on as well with the text. But that came in, that was influenced the day before. This is why I like talking about process and stuff, because my original plan, this is it, self-portrait of me, I took some selfies. I had one that I looked more sad in. I was like, you know what, I'll use the sad one. I've mentioned this before, but sometimes I might use something happy, or like whatever I'm using, it also invokes the opposite. So if I'm talking about lying, we're also talking about truth. If I'm talking about feeling sad, you might be thinking about, well, you're feeling sad, don't you want to be happy? Let's talk about happiness or positivity or whatever. So all I had in my head at first was, hey, I want to do this. Okay, which picture of myself do I use? Chose the picture, and then I said, okay, I'm gonna start doing that. I prepped the canvas with oil paint, and this is where again, like, process is so wonderful because I had ideas, but they weren't like, I'm gonna depict myself, I'm gonna draw it out, I'm gonna do whatever. I wanted to make it oil painted, but it didn't work out that way. So I prepped it for oil painting. That's why the yellow is oil paint, so that I could come to it with my other oil painting and do the portrait. But this is what happened. So that's part of the concept of the lemon tree aspect of it. It was the day before that I got really into an artist that I just found by happenstance called Dumbfounded. Also went by Dummy for a short period of time. And there's a song called History of Violence in one of the reels for this as well. The video that shows some of the close-ups and details. History of Violence. And there was this part in that song that really hit me, and it was, who the fuck's gonna save me, my brother? Who the fuck is gonna save me? And I was just, that hit me in the sads, and I felt like, okay, like, I sat down to do this piece, and then I started to draw with oil pastel. And then there was this whole thing where I had to think about, and this is what I don't like when I'm using certain mediums, like, okay, but the oil pastel will never dry. So if you put oil paint over oil pastel, it's still no good because the oil pastel doesn't dry, whereas oil paint eventually will dry. Whereas oil pastel is like more waxy. It's just like if you use lipstick on something, it doesn't dry. I've done it with art. Lipstick doesn't dry. It's so waxy, it just never, ever dries. We're talking about decades later. It doesn't dry. Oil pastel, you can use fixatives and things that help for sure, but especially if it's a thick application, it has a really hard time drying. But also, again, if I painted oil paint on top of it, it'll just, whatever, it's not archival, and it won't, it'll have a really hard time drying properly and then not changing later. And sometimes I'm like, I don't care if it's archival, this is just the process, things will change, and I like that element of irresponsibility because it opens me up. But then this became also like a challenge that forced me into a different direction with this piece too. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm just doing it on oil pastel. Because I started that way and then I stopped and I said, wait a second, I gotta actually research this. Can I do this? And then put oil paint over it. I can't do it if I want it to be archival, which sometimes I care about, sometimes I don't. Whole other thing to think about. But anyway, I wrote that text in the background first. Before I did the drawing of this. And it is text, the lyrics are there from both songs. It's like, who the fuck will save me, my brother, who the fuck will save me, in my lemon tree. So emotionally I was like really just, feeling the sentiments of Lemon Tree, feeling that very small section of History of Violence, and that just came in here with the sads. And that chaotic energy from History of Violence, I think, is there too. Like, who the fuck will save me? Again, there's like asking questions. There's an element of desperation. There's an element of danger. There's an element of just like such a high emotional response that you don't know where it's going to go, or pleading, questioning, existentialism. All this stuff to me happens from that. But anyway, basically that technical part is, again, going with the process. I pushed myself to do something I normally wouldn't do, and my proportions weren't super correct. That's why I don't have eyes. And then I thought, actually kind of fits conceptually. It's fine with me that I don't have eyes. I'm not going to readjust all this to like compress it so that the eyes are where they should be and all that stuff. The other part, again, conceptually, I think what happened with Bleeding Charismatically is I'm talking about now two artists, whereas before it was just Post Malone. But I was thinking, especially with Post Malone, how and I've just only recently, it's only been the last year that I've really been listening to anything by him and just exploring his catalog, and I feel as though, you know, he has this way of expressing sadness, not just in ballads, but in all ranges of songs and music that he does, that is so wonderful and beautiful. It's accessible, but it is also deeply vulnerable, to the point where I think there is a lot of appreciation, not just from a shallower crowd and not just from one that likes depth, but it can reach me when maybe the music wouldn't have alone, but the combination of what he's putting in there and being able to access his vulnerability is so important. And I think, despite the fact that he wouldn't necessarily categorize himself as an incredibly confident or charismatic person, I think he is. I think that's pretty undeniable in the way that he expresses certain things or does certain things. And I would just, that notion of like, again, invoking one thing and also invokes the opposite. I do not bleed charismatically. I feel like I do the opposite of that. I feel like it is ugly and messy and whatever else. But going back to the original thing, if this is accessible, and I'm showing you this is blood, this is fear, this is sadness, this is humanness, and it's raw, and it's not just, this is really pretty and this is aesthetic, but if you were drawn to it at first because of that, I don't know if I would categorize that as bleeding charismatically. But it is bleeding in such a way that different people that normally wouldn't be attracted to this, to look at it more, to absorb the information, to interact, to give themselves up, to be a part of this, to give a part of themselves, to be open enough to experience the work. Like, they wouldn't have that opportunity. It wouldn't reach as many people. And if that's part of the point, I think that puts myself into question a little bit of like, when I do create bodies of work in the future, how responsible do I want to be? How much forethought should I have? This went off the rails into a whole other thing. But, yeah. This is what I don't like about being restricted by time. I wanted to make videos like 10 minutes and under. But here we are. So anyway, I'm going to keep going. I think that just put that into question for me because of the response. And it's like, well, I don't want to be that, I don't want to have that much forethought because then I wouldn't be in the process as much. But there's a balance there, and I'm learning that balance. And I think it's incredibly important. I think that the response to that, the title, everything conceptually that's going on with even reflecting upon it is really important for myself, my artistic practice, to evaluate and look at how does that change how I work in the future. And even just like processing, like, this is what a certain section of a certain audience thinks or feels, or how, again, like, there's just hints of how someone responds to this work versus other work. And it's not just the content or the concept. I think that the response that this has gotten versus other pieces is purely aesthetics and visual. So it's interesting, and I would love to invite more discussion into that. So